In the previous video, we spoke about how we can select our lights. So now we know how to select our lights and grab control of them, we can start to give them some intensity information. And so we can select our lights either through syntax or through selecting our fixtures through the channel grid. So I might want to go and say 1 through 6 by selecting them by clicking and dragging, and I could then simply go and say at 75 enter, and that's going to set them to 75%. I'm going to go and set them to at 50 now, so I'm going to go and say at 50, but I don't actually need to set that 0. So if I go at 50 enter, yes, those lights will go to 50%, but with my 11 through 14, if I go and say 11 through 14 at 5 enter, that also sets them to 50%. So the console will, by default, assume we're talking tens. So at 1, it's going to give you 10, at 2 is going to give you 20, and so on. It just saves you an extra button press. But as we can see, I could indeed go and say at 50 enter. That is absolutely fine. It is allowed. So with that in mind, if we did want these lights at 5%, not 50, I can just go and say at 05 enter, and that's going to set them to 5 if I want them to be very dim. We have got a full button on the console. Of course, it's very common that you just want to turn your lights onto full. So you can go and select your lights and then go ahead and hit full, and that's going to set the fixtures straight to full. As well as the full key doing that, double tapping at also does that. So if you're someone that types in a syntax command and immediately goes to hit the at button, you can just go and double tap at, and that's going to set your fixtures to full as well. Now when you've got fixtures selected, straight away you're going to be able to use the intensity wheel on the console. So I'm actually going to go and dial that down, and you'll see there that I've got direct control over the current selected fixtures values. So I can use my intensity wheel to grab control of that. But as well as that, as soon as you've got lights selected, you're going to be able to use your fixture control sidebar. And within here we have an intensity tab, and that actually allows me to also use an on-screen slider to adjust the level of that too. Couple of handy buttons. We can also get a very quick off button and a very quick full button. Also in here we've got some editable fields. So if I want these lights to be at 50%, I can actually go and edit that value and just type it literally in here, rather than using syntax to do that. So let's talk a little bit about our release button while we're here. You might see here at the top the release key has turned red. That is indicating that we have got manual information present. We've gone and manually adjusted our fixtures. The release button is a two-step process. The first tap of release, that will what we call release the currently selected fixtures. So if I've got these fixtures selected and I go and tap release, notice how our values and selection is cleared for those particular fixtures. So the first tap of release, that's going to clear the values and selection for the currently selected lights. The second tap of release, that will then get rid of any other values that might be present. So the release is kind of a two-step process to be aware of. Now also on the console we have an on button. The on button is also situated up here on your tools up the top. So if I go and select my fixtures and turn them on, that will also by default set them to full. But the on level can be adjusted. If you ever actually want to set a custom on level, you can go to options, and you can then go to system properties, and within system properties go to system settings, and in the basic tab you will see you can actually define the on level. So you might want to say, oh actually it's really useful for focusing that actually I only need the lights to be on at 70% when focusing. Maybe, you know, whoever is actually going and focusing the lanterns, you don't want it at full intensity for when they're doing that. So if you want to use the on button for when you're actually focusing your lights, you might want to go and change that custom on level. In my case, though, I'm going to leave it at 100% and click cancel. The on button has a little pull down menu. That gives you some access to some other functions. So you'll see that's where you can access the full option. So if you're not using the physical console buttons, you can actually access full from this drop down. And you'll see that there's also highlight and rem dim in here as well. We're not going to go in detail into those, but you can access those from the on pull down. Now, as well as selecting a fixture and clicking on to turn it on, you can actually double click a fixture. If you double click a fixture in the channel grid, that will also, and I'm literally just doing this now, I'm going in and double clicking on some random fixtures, it is going to also be setting those fixtures to the on level too. And the opposite on is out. So if I go and say out, that's going to go and set the currently selected fixtures to 0. So what I might want to do is I might want to go and say select active out. If I do that, I'm guaranteed a blackout, because select active is selecting everything and tapping out is going to set everything to 0. So select active out, anything on, turn it off. You might have noticed that we've actually got a little bit of brackets, still very small text in brackets here next to the fixture's intensity. The information in brackets is the history. That is the previous intensity level that light was at. So I can see in this case here, these fixtures were previously FL. They were at full previously. Now, what we can also do, as well as just defining intensities for our lights and being done with it, we can actually set ranges of intensities as well. So I might want to go and say, for example, 31 through 37 at 100 enter. Of course, as we've been familiar with, that's going to set all of those fixtures to the same value. It's going to set them all to 100. But this time I'm going to go and say 31 through 37 at 0 through 100 enter. And we can start to do intensity ranges. You can see there we're going from fixture 31 through 37, and we're telling the console we want them to be at value 0 through to 100. And the console has then filled in the gaps accordingly there. Of course, I might have decided, whoops, that's the wrong way round. I actually need these fixtures to be at 100 through 0. And I can reverse that, I can flip it round if I need to. As well as just doing ranges, I can do peaks and troughs. So I might actually want to say at 100 through 0 through 100 enter. And that's going to give me a trough. I've got the outer two fixtures at full. In fact, this little, the ML view here is quite useful for showing that, because I can see that trough in intensities. If I want to make it a peak, I'm going to go and say at 0 through 100 through 0, enter. And then we get a peak in the middle. So we can very quickly do intensity ranges through syntax if we need to. Last thing to mention with intensities, you've got a up and down button. Very useful for just boosting your lights up a little bit or taking them down a touch. If you go to options, system properties, system settings again, as we were previously, you can see the up and down level is 5. That's 5%. Tap up, it's going to boost the lights by 5%. Tap down, it's going to take them down by 5%. But just like we did with our on level, we can actually customize the up and down level change percentage, so that we could actually go and click that button and our lights change by 10% on a press of that button if we want to. I'm not going to change that though, so I'm going to go and click cancel and say, yes, that's fine. I don't need to save those changes. So I'm going to double tap clear, and that concludes our intensities video.